Chapter 568, Subsidiary Gods. In the information provided by the Sun, there were detailed examples of some typical subsidiary gods, but most of the information didn't provide their true names, only their titles. These included the goddess of beauty and the goddess of life, who were subsidiaries to vampire ancestor, Lilith, the goddess of misfortune, and the god of the dead, who were subsidiaries to annihilation demonic wolf, Phlegrea, the god of luck and the queen of calamity, who were subsidiaries to elf king, Soniathrim, and so on and so forth. Queen of Calamity. Klein suddenly thought of the Book of Calamity and the golden wine cup he had taken from the ruins of the High Elf. The name Kohainum and the word calamity was engraved on it in Elvish. This caused him to make the connection that Kohainum was the Elf King's subsidiary, Queen of Calamity. Unfortunately, I can't directly seek confirmation with Little Sun. I'll have to wait for further information from him. Klein sighed silently. At the same time, he made some theories about the fact that these titles didn't correspond with their true names. The City of Silver was originally the Kingdom of Silver that came under the Giant King's court's rule. Other than having sufficient understanding of its own forces and enemies, the information regarding the other ancient gods will only come from legends and rumors, and they aren't that detailed. Compared to the simple and easy-to-understand titles, a god's true name can consist of complicated and difficult words to remember, which can make it harder for them to be spread. The information provided to Klein when he turned over the page confirmed his theory. However, it gave him new doubts. The dragons also had a dragon of wisdom, which was the equivalent of a god in the City of Silver, called Heribergen, and under Giant King Ormir, there was also his eldest son, the god of dawn, Badhail, and his queen, the goddess of harvest. Why doesn't the goddess of harvest have a real name? Is she the queen of the Giant King's court? The City of Silver should have records of it. These so-called subsidiary gods are equal to the angels or king of angels of later times. Yes, the sequence 2 of their pathway and sequence 1s of the other pathways. Klein suppressed his perplexion and inferred the truth from the information recorded in the card of blasphemy. Within the same pathway, if there was a sequence 0, then there wouldn't be a sequence 1, and if there was no sequence 0, then there would be at most 3 sequence 1s. However, Klein didn't dare to base his judgment on this. After all, his knowledge was partial, and he didn't even know if there were any preconditions for the sequence 0 and sequence 1, which was derived from the law of beyonder characteristics conservation and indestructibility. I'll assume this for the time being. Klein leaned back, letting the information in his hands disappear, smiling as he said, "You may begin." At this point, Alger was still seriously examining himself. After considering how to communicate properly, he used the technique of being in the other person's shoes. He started from the point of view of the hermit, who was suspected of being Admiral of Stars, to see what exactly he had exposed. Mr. Fools protects every member's true identity with a blurred and distorted image, but this method doesn't affect the representation of colors. Dark brown colors can be difficult to distinguish, but bright colors are easily grasped. At the very least, I can tell that Miss Justice is blonde with bright green eyes. And for me, the most obvious thing I can't hide is my dark blue hair. But this doesn't say anything. It's not a problem to say that dark blue hair is a common mutation in Beyonders within the Sailor pathway, but the converse isn't true. This is because such traits are hereditary. On Sonya Island and in the Berserk Sea around Daisy Bay, they were places where elves originally gathered. Many humans with traces of elven blood will also have dark blue hair. It's the same for districts where there are a certain number of Church of Storms Beyonders. Ignoring any other trait, it's difficult for the hermit to determine any further information based on the situation. Just as Alger heaved a sigh of relief, he caught sight of the storm robe he was wearing. After returning to the Blue Avenger, not only was he the captain of the ship, but he was also the bishop of the sailors. He often needed to wear the corresponding clothes to celebrate Mass. If he didn't show his devotion in his daily actions, there might come a day when he would be reported by his subordinates. The Church of Storms has always been wary of those members who had been drifting out at sea for a long time, as prolonged acting as pirates might one day turn them into real pirates. In any case, The Lord of Storms has never given a revelation to exclude pirates from his followers. Under the cover of that blurred distortion, it's hard to see the details of one's clothing clearly. This isn't a problem. However, I still have to pay attention in the future. During tarot gatherings, I should change into a set of ordinary clothes. Although I can't be sure, I still have to treat her as a pirate admiral. I can't afford to be careless. Alger thought cautiously. At this moment, he heard the seemingly suppressed voice of the moon Emlyn, which was a result of him being unable to hide his emotions. "Mr. Hanged Man, I've done the preparations. When can you obtain the inheritance of that sanguine baron? You mentioned before that it's in the hands of some powerful pirate." You didn't have to say the last sentence. Alger's body instantly stiffened. Powerful pirate? The hermit's eyes swept over the Hanged Man once again. Alger's expression didn't change as he turned his head to the moon and asked, "Have you obtained the funds?" Of course, Emlyn raised his neck. He originally wanted to wait until the 3-month maturity was up before he went to the bank to withdraw the money. But he soon discovered that he was in a completely different mood after deciding to buy the Sanguine Baron's inheritance. He no longer had any qualms or hesitation. He was filled with expectation and desire, wishing that he could get his hands on it immediately. It was just like how he felt in the past when he was about to buy a beloved doll. He had held back for more than a week before finally giving up by selling the acceptance draft. Although he had lost some money, it was still acceptable. In many situations, an acceptance draft could be used as a currency. "I'll get it for you within the week. Finally, let's confirm the price, £4,500. Is that all right?" Seeing that a deal was about to be struck, Alger didn't pursue the moon's act of exposing him. Emlyn thought about the dolls in his room, cleared his throat, and said with his eyes furtively darting around, "Can it be cheaper? It's not up to me to decide, but I can try to acquire it for you at a lower price. Also, don't forget my commission. Let's lower it. How about £300? Alger's tone didn't change at all. "All right," Emlyn exhaled quietly. Not a very powerful vampire, an underaged or a recently matured one. Katlia silently watched from the sidelines and made her judgment. Seeing that the deal between Mr. Hanged Man and Mr. Moon had been concluded in a few sentences, Audrey habitually felt that she should buy something. "In a week or two, I'll contact the members of the Psychology Alchemists in Eastchester County and tell them that I've become a Psychology Alchemists member. I'll exchange my contribution points for the subsequent potion formula. There's no need to make a request to purchase it here for the time being. Once I find out what ingredients are needed, I can ask for everyone's help. There's no need to buy any mystical items for now. I've already had one of them reimbursed." Being able to obtain such rare items with too great a frequency might imply many problems. Audrey's thoughts raced, and she came up with an idea. She turned halfway and looked at the gloomy man at the end of the table. "Mr. World, you mentioned that you have clues to the characteristic left behind by a psychiatrist. Have you successfully acquired it?" "I plan on buying it for Susie," she silently added in her heart. In fact, when she was considering this matter, she had another slightly mischievous idea, which was to find an excuse for Mr. Fool to turn over the Black Emperor card which sat beside him. From her point of view, Ma'am Hermit was particularly affected by the matter regarding Roselle's diary. And from how her reaction was extraordinarily excessive before she quickly hid it, it was quite possible that she knew about the cards of blasphemy. Therefore, the moment she saw it, she would expose a lot of problems and express the truest thoughts in her heart. But she dismissed the idea in the end, not because she thought it would be bad to sound out Ma'am Hermit, but that this was a way of showing responsibility to both herself and the Tarot Club, and that she shouldn't make decisions for Mr. Fool. If he wanted Ma'am Hermit to recognize the card of blasphemy, he definitely would have flipped it open himself. If he didn't want to do so, then any attempts would be against his will. Audrey nodded solemnly, but almost imperceptibly. At this moment, the world replied hoarsely, "If you're certain that you want it, then I will give it to you as soon as possible. The price is £1,800. Normally, it would be more appropriate to charge £1,200 to £1,500 for a psychiatrist's beyonder characteristic. But Klein had raised the premium slightly to see how much Miss Justice could pay. All right, Audrey agreed with a light tone. She had paid off the money owed to Viscount Glaint. She had received many gifts for having reached adulthood after returning to her family's fief. It was a time when her finances were in a rather good condition. She had even arranged for the money to be returned to Mr. Fool's Blessed next month. In the future, her monthly income would be above £3,000, and a substantial portion of her normal expenses wasn't going to be borne by her, due to the love of her parents and the results of her previous meritorious exploits. While the two were discussing, the hanged man was somewhat surprised. The world had just sold the faceless Beyonder characteristic the previous time, and he had recently acquired Steel Mavetti's Beyonder characteristic. Yet, he appeared to have a psychiatrist characteristic in his collection, and all of this happened in less than a month. On second thought, Alger quickly came to an understanding. The world represented a group of blessed of Mr. Fool. That might be the harvest from the other blessed. As he imagined this, the world, who was Klein, was in a state of shock towards Miss Justice's opulence. He had thought that Miss Justice, who had just spent £5,500 on a mystical item, wouldn't be as well off as before. It was just like last year, so he had reserved space for her to haggle. Who knew that she would still agree to the deal without hesitation? Has she dug up a gold mine? Klein couldn't help but silently lampoon. Seeing that they had finished their discussion, Derek hurriedly raised his hand, having learned from Miss Justice. Which one of you has the fruit of the Radiant Spirit Pack tree? He had rather successfully collected the other ingredients of the Solar High Priest potion. Just as Katlia had initially figured out that Miss Justice was a yet-to-advance psychiatrist, she heard this request. After a few seconds of silence, she said, "I do. What can you provide in exchange?" After observing for a long time, she decided to intervene in a small transaction to gain a deeper understanding of how the Tarot Club operated. I can use the history of the City of Silver or the history of dragons, elves, and other dark creatures to barter," Derek said sincerely. "Ma'am Hermit, this is a list of commonly seen monsters around the City of Silver. You can choose any ingredients you need from it." How honest. Klein almost looked up at the dome of the magnificent palace. What is he talking about? Katlia frowned slightly, momentarily failing to understand a single word from the son.